Well, happening tomorrow, the people of France will head to the polls to elect a brand new president, and the entire world will be watching. Will it be independent centrist frontrunner Emmanuel Macron or his far-right National Front rival Marine Le Pen? You might be thinking, well, this is France. Why should I care about the politics there? But our next guest says this election is unlike any other, with the potential to seriously impact the rest of the world, including here in the United States.
Yeah, Richard Watts is the chair of the Department of French and Italian Studies at the University of Washington, also an associate professor. Good morning. So let's get into a little bit of the history of these two candidates, one of whom will be president by Sunday afternoon.
Indeed. Well, there's very little history on Emmanuel Macron. He was Minister of the Economy under François Hollande for a relatively short period. And broke off from the Socialist Party to create his own party, En Marche, which, as everyone knows, is at this point fairly comfortably ahead in the polls. Marine Le Pen has a much longer history, and in fact, when people talk about the DNA of the Front National, they mean it quite literally, because she is the daughter of the founder of the party, Jean-Marie Le Pen. And it's a party that has recently tried to mainstream itself to some degree, but that has a very long history of, especially on the part of Jean-Marie Le Pen, of inflammatory, anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant statements. And the daughter speaks in a more coded language, but it's that sort of dog whistle rhetoric. The followers hear what they want to hear. They hear the echoes of what her father used to say. And those two apparently now are feuding, but there are many who suspect that it's a show for the larger voting public. The daughter and the father at odds with each other. The daughter representing a modern version of the party, but most don't buy that. What you can say, though, is that with Marine Le Pen polling close to 40% in the second round of the election, she has had an effect in making the Front National a more mainstream party.
And what do we know about Macron? You said his history is not as rich as the other candidates, but what do we know?
Well, he's young. He's 39. He had a distinguished academic record. He studied philosophy as an undergraduate. He has a master's in public administration from one of France's leading institutions in that field. And had a brilliant career as an investment banker, and this is why, for many on the far right, he is the candidate of international finance, right? So that the clever word that Marine Le Pen's likely prime minister, were she to be elected, had the other day was it's a choice between France and finance. Right? Oh. Marine Le Pen representing France, Emmanuel Macron representing finance. But he has a very clear program, and this is just this morning he was reaffirming a very controversial part of his platform, which is to reform laws around employment in France. Very unpopular when they were initially presented. I would say equally unpopular today, but you know what you're getting with Macron, right? You're getting the continuity of Europe as a free trade zone. You're getting the continuity of a sort of support of the political project of Europe. With Marine Le Pen, it's much harder to say what you're actually getting.
A lot of fear around what she represents. I think, as you pointed out in the polls, it doesn't seem like she's going to be elected, but that doesn't mean her influence or her party is going away. This whole election cycle has really proven, as you said, I mean, she's the opposition now. Right.
Well, she's presenting herself already as the opposition to the likely victor in this presidential election. But it's very hard to imagine that Marine Le Pen, or that the party, the Front National, will be able to constitute a parliamentary majority in the legislative elections that follow just a few weeks after the presidential election. But she will have more influence on the national stage. The fact that she was able to create an alliance with another political party, albeit a small one that only got 5% in the first round of the presidential election, suggests, again, this effort to mainstream. And by bringing in this Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, this other political figure, Gaullist political figure on the French scene, she's even softened her position on exiting the euro, on exiting the common currency, in an attempt to gather more votes, and this was the fear that this would allow her to do better in the presidential election. But it doesn't look as if that's going to happen at this point.
And very briefly, we're almost out of time, but I can feel people watching this, and they find this fascinating, they find it interesting, but they think, but I'm over here in the United States. Why should we all care about the outcome of this election?
I think two main reasons. One is the continuity of Europe and the stability of Europe. I mean, lest we forget, World War II, not so long ago, left Europe completely fractured and had a dramatic effect on the rest of the world. And this is not to suggest that a sort of World War III would break out in Europe if the institution of Europe were to dissolve, but there would be a lot of political and economic instability. Locally, Washington State does an enormous amount of business with France. There are many suppliers for Boeing that are implanted in the Puget Sound region that are from France, that are French. And there, in a candidate like Macron, you have a sort of belief in sort of technology transfer, and he's sort of presented as the candidate of French high tech. And so one can imagine possible trade relations that could emerge, that could be further developed. Marine Le Pen is going to be France as a sort of closed national space, and that doesn't do anyone good, neither us nor the French.
Richard Watts, Associate Professor at the University of Washington, thank you for helping us understand this and talk us through this morning. We'll be watching this election. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.